Good morning. All right, thank you very much, Brigadier Kipsos-Gay and Dr. Molly for those opening remarks. We've now been, the ball is now in our court. We've been told to have engaging discussions, to gain new knowledge and to challenge some of the ideas that we have. And hopefully this first session will do that right off the bat. So today's topic is the power of open source and its potential to transform the geospatial landscape. I'll start with some definitions. What do we mean by open source? Software that is publicly accessible for users to make use of, to study, to modify, and to distribute. And when we're referring to proprietary or closed software, this is the software that the copyright holder controls its scoping, inspection, and alteration. So for the purposes of today's discussion, I know there are several definitions, but we can use that to frame our discussion. So open source has played a transformative role in the evolution of the geospatial landscape with tools such as OpenStreetMap, ODK, QGIS, which have now become an indispensable part of the ecosystem. Open source software has been credited with increasing availability to geospatial tools, increasing innovation, enabling customization, and ensuring transparency and trust in these tools. However, they've also faced some challenges, such as sustainability. Our panel, but I would like to start by asking each one of them to kick us off. What role have you seen open source playing in terms of in the evolution of the geospatial landscape? And I'll start with you, Pauline. Just a quick reaction before we get into a series of questions.
Thank you, Declan. So as ESRI, we have seen that innovation and ideas come from everywhere. So that could be within our company as well as other players within the industry. So when it comes to application of those insights and so on, we see the influence that the entire geospatial community can derive or can benefit from the ability to take advantage of what is there in the community in terms of capabilities, in terms of workflows, in terms of knowledge, and so on. So with that, over the years also, given that we are a technology provider, so this extends beyond software, this comes to data, this comes to enablement and so on. We also do contribute into the open community in various ways because we see how there's first a symbiotic relationship between different industries in the community, as well as we are seeing the model where a lot of users in the community are taking a hybrid approach in terms of leveraging what's already there with proprietary technology, as well as seeing how else can they extend the use of technology within certain areas that they're operating in. So we do value the nature of working together within the community, and that's why we also contribute to the open community in various ways. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Stephane, the same question.
Thank you, Declan. So for me, How open source has contributed to the geospatial landscape. It's if you look at it 22 years ago when I started my career as a software GIS developer, the consensus was that using or incorporating open source or products into GIS solutions was risky. Open source was considered fragile and business models were weak or inexistent, and developers maintaining these open source platforms were scarce, and they could leave from one day to the next. But today it's a completely different story. We have had several decades of investments into open source libraries which support developers. We have had decades of investments into open source products and platforms who support end users directly. And these investments are like seed funding for startups, but with no single strings attached. So it's like a huge donation. It's a Christmas gift. And this gift is promoting entrepreneurship. It's promoting the creation of new companies. It's promoting education, training, self-training. It's also making organizations which core business is not GIS, more autonomous using feel that like the big closed source players are really playing a big role there with standardizing innovations. They bring those innovations into their core suites of products. And maybe more importantly, they also integrate those innovations into coherent suite of products. They essentially provide organizations with enterprise solutions which require more configuration type work than software development. I think we've seen this pattern repeat several times, with the big players, Microsoft, Google, satellite imaging provider, ESRI to some extent. And so I think both play a very important role in this industry.
Thank you, Stephane. Yaw.
Thank you, Declan and Pauline and Stephane. So my perspective on this is a slightly different. For me, it wasn't so long ago that GIS software was super expensive and was not available to all people. And over the last few years, we've seen a relatively small group of people come together as volunteers, and they built a lot of open source software. They've provided a lot of open data, and that has, in many ways, democratized the space. It's reduced the duplication of effort, it's accelerated innovation, and projects like QGIS and OSM, and in many ways ODK, come to mind as examples. As the founder and CEO of ODK, I find it very interesting that my other panelists, my friends here, all use ODK. ESRI uses ODK in Survey 123. Novelty uses ODK in GTS Tracker. The Kenya Space Agency uses ODK. And all these examples show what a small group of people, my team has only 10 people, a small group of people can enable. From my perspective, it's not all good news. We get great satisfaction from providing public goods for the benefit of all. But I should say that there has been, over time, a lot of free riding where people take and they benefit from these public goods, but they don't necessarily give back. And this puts a lot of pressure on a lot of these small projects. And ultimately, it slows the growth, not just of open source projects, but also closed source proprietary software as well. ODK has been fortunate that we've survived despite the pressure over the last 16 years, but it has not been easy. And I don't worry too much about ODK, but I worry about the future ODKs of the world that have to survive under this kind of pressure. So I think from my perspective, if we really want to see innovation, if you want to see impact, if we want to see these things accelerate, we have to be more serious about sort of the benefits of these different models and how we can harness them to have great impact, but do so sustainably.
Finally, Charles.
Thank you, Declan, and good morning, everyone. I will take the perspective of both fields, of both the private, the open source and the commercial. As an agency, we see an opportunity for both because we see the potential of the commercial. Of course, there's the value that comes from them in terms of being tested and validated. And also now we're seeing the open source get into the space where we are able to build solutions on top of them. And I wanted to step back and just give a bit of a hindsight in terms of where we're coming from as a country. And a study was done a few years ago in 2017. It was led by UNDP, where they were trying to analyze the adoption of using GIS within national government and county government. And some of the gaps that they identified, they were looking at hardware and software, human resource and data. And when they were analyzing in terms of the software, one of the major impediment was in terms of the cost. Of course, we've seen the cost going down, but that still remains a major challenge for the adoption of these tools. And the open source tools, I'm honored to be sitting next to you, who has, again, been working heavily in terms of pushing the ODK platform. You also mentioned QGIS. And of course, we have other platforms, Digital Earth Africa, Google Earth Engine also coming to the fore. We see that as helping us deepen the market because, again, for those who've gone traditional systems where we got exposed to ESRI software, Pauline is representing that, the NV. The challenge that we got when we got out of universities where we could not access those tools was that we were not able to practice. And the open source tools now have gotten to the place where we are able to use all those to practice and develop solutions much more easily. And I wanted also to drive to, Dr. Molly mentioned that the focus during this forum will be looking at people, data tools, and last mile. And I think we need to put in a bit of effort in trying to see how then can we leverage the best of both worlds. Because like you mentioned, there is a challenge, of course, in terms of the financing for these programs. And then how then do we scale using the open source or build communities around the open source that allows us to develop solutions on top of that, and then also support the commercial element, because again, they all serve the communities that we both serve and we want to grow sectors on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to follow up on those comments, and I'll start this time with you, Charles, especially having seeing this happening from a government perspective. Are governments embracing the use of open source more than previously? And as they're doing so, are you seeing more of a conflict when choosing or promoting either of the tools, whether they're open source or whether they're proprietary tools? Is there a conflict? Is there adoption increasing?
Yes, we sit in a tight space because, again, we want to promote both sectors to grow. of using such tools. Because like I indicated earlier, one of the impediments in terms of growing the sector has been the cost bit. And when you're using Google Earth Engine, all you require is an account. And that is one of the projects where we're also using ODK as for data collection. And what we found from that process is that we had institutions who are saying they're not able to utilize these tools. And then when we walked through that process, then they were able to say that potentially they see the value. But having said that, we also moved, the other conversation evolved into how then can they also utilize, because again, some of the commercial tools are very easy to set up. So we see that potential as well in terms of creating a blend between the two. And even in our system, we are creating hybrid systems that allow us to get the best of both worlds. But of course, in terms of, I see that as a value, because if you're able to deepen the market, then it also creates opportunities for the commercial sector that are selling their commercial softwares, because when you have an expanded market, it allows them to also have a market that is already captive and understand the value proposition. Because we understand the major gap is in terms of the capacity, and if you're able to build the capacity across, whether it's open source or commercial, then it is for the benefit of the sector.
Thank you very much, Charles. And then I'll come back to you, Yaw. You mentioned, you talked about sustainability in your opening remarks, and I know you're on record as saying ODK is sustainable. What's the silver bullet? How did you manage to get to sustainability as an open source project? What are some of those tips that you would give to other projects that may be looking to also become sustainable?
I mean, I wish I could say there was some silver bullet. I think if you work at something long enough, eventually it's going to work out. Yeah, so we've been doing it for a very long time, I guess 16 years or so, and it is rare to have a piece of software that lasts that long, and that has been impactful for that long. It has not been easy. So, but you know, my mom was just nothing worth doing is easy. I would say that sustainability to me means that you have the funding or the resources that you need to continue solving problems for your users. We have tried pretty much everything over those 16 years to do it, from donationware to innovation funding to trying to find volunteers to write the code. We've reached a point now where we have a very small team that is paid to make ODK. There are 3 revenue streams that drive the project. The first is ODK Cloud, which is our cloud-hosted software as a service. People pay a monthly fee. That's recurring revenue that's growing over time. I think it's about 3% growth, so it's pretty good. We have implementation revenue streams where there are very large projects that need our help, and as long as it aligns with our roadmap, we can contribute. That pays for some of the bills, and then there's also grants. But unlike the old days when we started the project, we now only really pursue grants that align with our existing roadmap. So there's sort of a blend there of revenue, and that's what keeps the project sort of sustainable. Another thing to note is that we don't just it's a generic tool. It's not just a health tool people use for health. It's not an elections tool people use it for elections. So that versatility, that variety builds a lot of resilience into the project. And then the third is like, it's a very small team. Sometimes people think like it's 100 people working on ODK. No, we have 10 full-time people working on ODK. I count as one of those full-time. Have an ODK solves a lot of those problems because there is a core team that is paid. We do pen testing, we provide support. We have a designer, actually Ali's here right now, a product designer that's highly committed to listening to users and making that software better. So I think over time, you will find that you can get the best of both worlds if there's a sustainable model behind it. The last thing I want to point out, I know I'm taking too much of your time here, but I think it's important for us to think about sustainability beyond just the finances. And so when I think of sustainability, I think of more about what culture can we build at ODK, what processes can we put in place that ensures that the project continues to stay relevant over time. And so a big part of that is just putting in processes in place where we are hyper-focused on providing value to our users and hyper-focused on listening. One of the reasons I like to do these events, even though it's pretty far away from where I live, I think it's really important that from the top down, that we are listening to our users and responding to their needs. And so that to me is I like ODK to be around for another 100 years. And so a big part of that is just listening and responding and being agile. So I think, so that's what I think about as far as sustainability.
Thank you. I just want to, again, thank you for the folks who have traveled a long way to be present and to share their views with everybody here, especially with the flight disruptions because of the strike. Not the strike that we're normally used to, a crowd strike, yeah. All right, as we go to the last two panelists, I'd like to invite us to think if you have questions for this distinguished panel, we'll have an opportunity to pose some of those before we go into the closing remarks. So if you have some questions, we'd love to hear them. As folks think about the questions, Stephane, because you have experience implementing both proprietary tools and open source tools. Where do you see the innovation happening? Is it happening more on one side versus the other side? Plus, you also have a lot of experience, more than 20 years of experience of engineering information systems in the public sector. Are there some lessons that from doing that you would share with others?
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a difficult question. I think innovation happens more in the open source sector, but it's hard to quantify. But to me, when you think about GIS innovations, I think they take birth at the crossroad of academic research, open data initiatives like supported by governments or other initiatives like OpenStreetMaps and things like that, and open source code. If you think about it, the whole world can look into how ODK is implemented, for instance. Everybody, pretty much anyone in the world here can read, reuse, adapt, and improve open source solutions. While with closed source software, only those working within the software company and who have been granted to that piece of code can review the implementation. So mathematically, I think this limits reusability, improvements, and innovations to fewer individuals. That said, successful closed source companies, they usually have more sustained sources of revenues. And so they do also contribute to innovation with the GIS industry. And this is especially true for companies that support strategic sectors where a lot of investments goes into research and development. But research and development is costly and risky. And I am going to be a little provocative here, but lately, we've seen some changes in how R&D is being done by companies, including myself. I'm a service provider. I'm not a product developer. I sometimes implement solution and deliver solution using closed source and sometimes open source solutions. Sometimes I contribute to open source projects, but typically, they belong to someone else and they decide whether they want to make it open source or not. But usually we try to use open source. But what we've seen is that, instead of investing into R&D, which is risky, what big companies can do is they can, sort of wait, or maybe they can put incentives so that innovations occur in the open source community. And by doing so, they reduce the risks and the investments that they make into closed source development. And they can identify which innovations are successful, what make them successful over others. They can look at how they've been implemented. They can identify and try to attract the talents that are working on these innovations, and they can obtain the source code, and they can embed it into their closed suite of products. So when you think about it, open source innovation benefits pretty much everyone in the industry, including closed source company and software service company like mine.
Thank you very much, Stephane. Some things to think about there in terms of innovation and the benefits from both sides of all sides of the spectrum. Finally, to you, Pauline, you work you're a senior solution engineer with ESRI. So one of the best known names when it comes to proprietary GIS software. So I know from your experience, you've seen how proprietary software could complement open source software. What are some of these areas? And if I could add, are there some particular applications where you see proprietary software is very well suited, or even dare say even better suited than open source solutions?
Thanks, Declan. So I'll start with agreeing with what Yaw had said, that we should listen to the users and to the community. And by that, that's how ESRI has, in many ways, responded to the needs of the community. What Charles had mentioned in terms of government more and more adapting or using technology, that's based on how most of these organizations, that is proprietary, how we have been able to see that public sector is now more agile. It's now more interested in not really having highly customized solutions, but having something that works. And that's because right now, most of government or most of the tech departments or tech entities of government have moved from, before the mission used to be, we just want to make sure that everything is running, but now the mission has changed to be enhanced service delivery. So we are changing the end user from the government having a system that's running, but having that last mile impact. The end user is now literally the constituent or the citizen who needs to make use of these resources. So through that, I would say for a lot of proprietary companies that are participating in the GIS community, we've responded to that in various ways, which I just mentioned. So first of all, when it comes to expertise, I think one of the limitations that we had, especially in our region, was we had very limited expertise in terms of being able to use technology or being able to use GIS to derive insights. So an example is that previously, most government, like let's say local authorities or county governments in the case of Kenya, we would not have so many decisions being made relying on GIS. So we all know that most decisions are tied to the what, where, why, how, when. And so now we have more and more of these entities relying on GIS, to make those decisions. And it has become very important to enable that. As Charles had mentioned, ease of being able to adapt this technology. So our response to that was basically, when it comes to expertise, to try and enable as many professionals to be able to apply this technology. So this has been through extensive documentation, which also supports language, because you'll notice that one of the biggest barriers we have to penetration of technology in lower middle income countries is language support and documentation available in a language that will be accessible to them. Also, training. So as part of our commitment to the community overall, we have a team that really supports training through our massive open online courses. So these are mainly run on our technology, granted, but they are mostly workflow based. So it means, for example, other than saying that you need to run these 5 tools to get a result, we present a problem. For example, we have this community that needs to improve access to healthcare. So how do you apply GIS as a tool to improve access to healthcare? So I'll say like that's another area of contribution we've made. When it comes to something that Stephane had mentioned, we have highly regulated industries or sections that are very protected in terms of access to their data and so on, even though we all agree that within the community, all of us apply the same standards and we comply to the same requirements in terms of security, whether you're on open source or proprietary and so on. So what we have done is provide that level of I always want to say comfort, but that guarantee to some of these entities that they don't have to spend so much time to build infrastructure and build technology to enable this, that they can leverage relationships that they have with entities such as ours. As the opening remarks mentioned, we have public-private partnership that's being leveraged to increase adoptability of technology, to improve scalability. That means if there are new areas of application, at least a company doesn't have to be too worried about how do we incorporate this. They can actually rely on companies to be able to do this for them. And also the aspect of innovation. So you'll find that we have a lot of innovation happening. And one of the ways that I can mention is, as ESRI, we have a significant investment we have in R&D. Up to 30% of our annual revenue goes into R&D. And beyond that, we also bring in what's available in the community so that a company doesn't have to start trying to figure out how do we bring this in. We've made it easier for them to do it because we want them to focus on what's their mission critical work. And we want them to enhance service delivery for last mile impact. So I'd say those are some of the ways that we are contributing, and we're trying to support users within the community to be able to leverage what's available right now with GIS technology.
I'd now like to open the floor. I don't know how much time we have. We started a bit later than we did. 5 minutes or five extra minutes. Okay. So that's 7 minutes from now. Okay. Do you have any questions that would like to pose? I can see 1, 2, 3 hands. We have, oh, great. We have Max. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and panelists. This was a very interesting and intriguing one. And I am Dr. Tubolaifa Warekroma from Nigeria. And one thing that resonates from all of the conversation, and it's a big pill we all have to swallow before I go to my question, is that especially from Yaw. As far as we want to, drive open source, we need to look for a stream of income to fund it, right? So it will be very difficult without, sustainable grants for systems to be free throughout. So you need to find maybe another part of your product to finance it. It's a big pill, and it's something that we all have to deal with. But then, Pauline, and maybe because we've done some work with it, you didn't really speak on the Africa Geoportal, and especially because there are a lot of young people here, and how much the access to Africa Geoportal and those tools, especially for them to practice and learn before they, and then there's a possibility to combine that with, some other open source software like QGIS, ODK, and things like that. So I really just wanted you to, buttress on that a little bit. Thank you.
Let's just take the 3 questions so that we can just behind and then, yeah.
Hello, Rocco Pansera from UNICEF. Thank you to all the panelists. Very interesting learning about the development of the open source environment. I have a question with regards to the linking to what Stephane was talking about, the standardization and the role of the big companies around standardizing innovation, and how this links to the efforts around digital public goods. As you know, there's been a big effort from Digital Square around creating these digital public goods catalogs, and all implementing partners, including ourselves, UNICEF and WHO, are really using that as a way to mediate or reduce an open market in between individual companies and countries, actors, as a way for us to be able to promote and recommend software that complies with certain standards. However, we have seen, for example, a limited number of GIS-related platform on the digital public goods list, and I'm wondering whether you have any perspective about the value or the role that you see in the digital public good nomination process, or if you haven't seen that much value especially for companies like ODK and Novelty, whether you think what improvements you think should be done to the digital public goods process for it to really be taken up more. Thank you.
Thank you. One last one.
Hi, I'm Richard Caldwell from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, based in Seattle, Washington. I welcome comments from all 4 panel members, and it was an excellent panel, so first, thank you. But Yaw, you mentioned in your early remarks that
honest, I think had I known it was going to be this much work, probably wouldn't have done it. I try to be really transparent with folks because when we started ODK was supposed to be a small part of my graduate research work, a small project. We tested out 100 users, and that was the end of that. We now have millions of users in 190 something countries, and it is an extraordinary amount of work to do that. I think if you talk to most people who find some success growing a big thing, they'll say that had they known, there's something about the naivete of the whole thing. I think for people who are starting now, and I talked to a lot of sort of open source founders or whatnot, I think there is a reality about what it takes to build a sustainable open source project. So there are lots of open source companies now where their founders or the project leads understand that sustainability is a must, and they think about that from the very beginning about what models will allow them to do it. So I think if I had to start over, I'd look at the other examples and I'd think about how the very structure of the project enables either collaboration or different business models. Let me give you just a quick example. So open source, I think, works really well when the thing that you're open sourcing is a developer-facing tool that's really small, like a library that converts from one data type to the other, where there's a lot of incentive for everyone in the ecosystem to collaborate. As you go up the stack, the thing that, as it looks more like a product, it becomes even harder to collaborate. So car companies can collaborate on like air filters, things that are not differentiating. But the moment you ask them to collaborate on the look and feel of the thing, it becomes very difficult. That's what we've experienced with ODK, is that when we started, we assumed that everyone would want to work on it regardless of the structure of the project. But the very structure of the project enables what you can and can't collaborate on. And so I think new founders now sort of understand that problem. And are picking sort of the right level to engage on. So in summary, would I do it again? I don't know. But the younger folks who are doing it are much more savvy and much more aware of the obstacles. And they're not so dogmatic as we used to be in the old days. They're very much more practical about what needs to happen in order to build these sort of public goods that will stand the test of time. Rocco's point, so I can just finish that up, on the DPGs and the DPIs, the digital public goods, digital public infrastructure. I think, again, I want to be like, I try to be hyper transparent about the work that I do. For ODK specifically, it hasn't been super valuable, in the sense that our users and our customers don't come to us and say, I want to use ODK because it is digital public infrastructure or because it's a digital public good. They come to us because here's a piece of software that solves our problem, has done it in a particular way with a particular set of values. And so the DPGs are nice as far as, putting a brand or a boundary around projects that share that vibe, for lack of a better word. And I think it's good to get funders together and to get them to collaborate on funding these sort of younger projects. But I think for projects like, DHIS2, ComCare, some of the established ones, people come to them because they solve that particular kind of problem. And to put an even finer point on it, I think it's really important for whether you're building proprietary software, open source software, whatever, the software has to solve people's problems. At the end of it, so we try not to, say like you should use ODK because it's open source. You can use ODK because it solves your problems. If it doesn't solve your problems, who cares if it's open source, So we want to be really hyper focused on that.
Thank you. So that's today's hot take on DPGs, the courtesy of Yaw. Anyone want to chime in really quickly because we're just out of time? Pauline, then Stephane.
Yeah, just a quick response to Dr. Tubo's question. So, as we have a GIS for Good program, which touches on many things, just to highlight, because we noticed that, of course, there are a lot of gaps in terms of access to data, access to skills or ability to build capacity, as well as access to technology. So we have a number of programs that touch on that, and I think the one that specifically that Dr. Tubo mentioned is focusing or targeting countries that are in lower middle income countries. So we have Africa Geoportal specifically for Africa, but you also have other geoportals as part of this initiative that are supporting access to learning resources, which is complemented by what we have with MOOCs, as well as other tutorials that are available free access
you will be facing even greater competition than closed source companies, because your source code is out there, because organizations, governmental organizations and NGO will take it, they will not contribute back, because service providers like me will take it, will deliver solutions to others that maybe don't want to contribute back, because closed source companies will also take it. So you face even more competition, and I think this is where we need to find a sustainable business models. Maybe you cracked one. I'm not sure. If GTS and GMT becomes mature products, they standardize, and at one point they're mature and they're out there, how competition will be and what the products will become in terms of roadmap and features. And so I don't have the answer to this kind of things. I think the Digital Square initiative is a great initiative. But to be frank, again, I think I see it more the other way around, like people trying to put their software on this list just to get funding. But I don't know how we can we do, yeah. I'm not sure what's the solution to this. But for us also, it wasn't really useful, and I think it was costly, like to be on the list even. So I felt like it was more, if something needs to be on the list here, we should have in fact support and funding to be able to pass through all of the steps to get there. And I also feel that maybe we need more technical people doing these technical reviews. I think they are sometimes a bit light, and then the list is not really relevant.
Thank you. We are out of time. As you can see, there's a lot that we'd love to discuss. So even as we don't want to commit the ultimate crime of making the tea cold by taking too long with the panel. So as we close, I'd like, if you have just one thought that you'd like the audience to remain with, 15 seconds. Just one thing that if you were to, from everything that you said, to remember, what would it be? And I'll ask you, Charles, to come down here to Pauline. One thought, 15 seconds.
So I have 15 seconds. So I have to utilize them fast. So I would say infrastructure, because we see that tying to the elements on data. How do you make it available? And one of the interventions that you're looking at, the Kenya Space Agency is setting up a data hub that has a data portal for a repository, data cube for processing, as well as a knowledge hub for sharing information. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah.
Not a lot of time. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this, is that open source gives you control. It gives you control over who makes the software, where it runs, what it does, what it costs, and so on. I think in the case of ODK, where the majority of the data that runs through the platform is sensitive and critical in some way, we think it's super important that users have that level of control that they need. As CrowdStrike has shown us, it's important to trust, but it's also important to verify. The last thing I would say is that we are a very community-oriented project. We are hosting an ODK and ONA meetup in Kilimani tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. The topic is going to be, shocker, geospatial data collection. We have a few spots remaining, so please come see me or Ali. Ali, can you raise your hand? Ali is our product designer at ODK. If you'd like to attend, and we'll try to get you a slot. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alistair.
Open source is not free, and if you have to support open source tools and products, try to put your resources with people who have this mindset of willing to make a change rather than adding additional dollar amounts to shareholders, and try to put it to with some of these folks who are at the border between being persistent and stubborn, because the more you work on things, eventually it works.
I was going to say the same exact point, that open source is not free. But in addition to that, just to add that according to the open source contributor index, some of the biggest supporters of open source projects happen to be big tech, or happen to be companies that are proprietary, because we do understand that it's not an open source versus scenario. It's mostly, we're trying to achieve impact. We're trying to enable as many people, individual contributors, as many companies as possible, enterprise, public sector, as many of them to achieve last mile impact. So we're part of a community. We need to find a way to collaborate and work together.
Thank you, and that resonates a lot. So even for us at Ushahidi, the role of the community in working together to solve whatever problems that we face in common, no matter the background that we're coming from, as long as we're all focused on solving the same problem, no matter the approach that we take, in the end, it's all about solving the